By the way, in this video, we're doing an amazing giveaway. I'll be giving away some exclusive swag, some coupon codes, and all sorts of things. So in order to take part in the giveaway, we're introducing some amazing open source projects in this video. You can find those links in the description below. And if you want to take part in the giveaway, you can star those GitHub repositories, as simple as that. And you can join the community. And if you want to contribute, you can do that since it's an open source project. So you can star the GitHub repositories in the description below. You can do that right now. And as a plus one, you can also share whatever you learned in this video on social media or write a blog for the We Make Devs challenges that we run monthly. Also, the links can be found in the description below. And just share your knowledge and share what you learned on social media and tag us, and we'll be happy to give you some swag. Let's get started. If the two things I've spoken a lot about on this YouTube channel, the first one is how complex Kubernetes is, and the second one is introducing open source tools that help us work with that complexity. Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're going to talk about simplifying Kubernetes cluster mapping, and we're going to introduce an amazing new open source tool to the community by Authorize called Network Mapper. So let's get started, and before we move forward with the solutions, let me talk a little bit more about why is there a need. Kunal, why are we even talking about it? Who cares? What is the need? How is it going to benefit us? So, when we talk about simplifying Kubernetes cluster mapping, it can be important for a few reasons. Reason number one, as we all know, it's pretty straightforward, ease of understanding. Because by simplifying the mapping of Kubernetes clusters, you can make it easier for people to understand the relationships between the different components of the cluster. You may have worked with various microservices, and it can get a little bit overwhelming, how they interact with each other and things like that. And this can especially be important when you have a large or complex cluster, as it can be difficult to keep track of everything without a clear mapping. The reason number two is streamlining deployment. And a simple cluster mapping can help to streamline the deployment process, and it makes it easier to deploy and manage the applications on the cluster. Why? Because this will save time and effort, and also it will reduce the risk of errors or issues during the deployment. So that's critical. Third one is again a popular one why most folks use Kubernetes, which is improving scalability. So when you're simplifying the cluster mapping, it can also make it easier to scale the cluster up and down as needed, because this can be important if you, let's say, need to quickly add or remove resources from the cluster in response to changes in your demands. So if we talk about, these are the why it's important, how it can benefit us. If we talk about Authorize Network Mapper, this is an amazing open source project that you can check out. Let me just show you. So this is the open source project on GitHub, and by the way, we're doing a giveaway as well. So you can start this GitHub repository like that, and we'll be giving away some nice swag, and you can write a blog around whatever you learned in this video, or a simple Twitter thread, or just a Twitter post, and you can tag Authorize, which you can find over here, right? So you can join their Slack channel if you want to get started with a conversation or get started with contributing. So you can check it out. So you can check that out, and you can take a screenshot of this, or you can just star the GitHub repository, and we'll reach out to you and give you some nice swag. And since it's open source, you can share feedback, contribute, and do all sorts of things. Okay, and when we talk about the network mapper, so ideally it's a tool that allows you to get insights about traffic in your Kubernetes cluster without requiring to make any changes in your existing setup. And it's designed to be lightweight and easy to use with zero configuration required. So one of the key benefits of Authorize is that it allows you to quickly and easily identify the sources of traffic within your cluster. And you can use the Authorize CLI, which we'll be doing in this video itself. We'll be doing a hands-on complete demo. So you can list the traffic by client, which can help you identify which applications or services are generating the most traffic. Now, this can be useful for troubleshooting performance issues, identifying potential security risks, or simply gaining a better understanding of how your cluster is being used. One more additional useful feature, if we talk about for Authorize, is the ability to visualize the traffic in your cluster. So by creating a network graph, as you can see on the screen, and we'll see more ways in which you can do that. You can show the connections between different nodes, and Authorize allows you to easily visualize the flow of traffic between different components of your cluster. So you have a full overall picture, and it looks really, really cool. So this can be particularly helpful when you're trying to troubleshoot network issues or optimize the performance of your applications. In addition to these features that I have mentioned, Authorize also allows you to export the results of your network mappings can export this as JSON or YAML, which can be useful for sharing insights with like other members of your team or integrating it with other tools. And if you ever need to like reset the traffic data that Authorize has collected, then you can do that as well with just a few simple commands. So overall, to sum up, if you want to sum up that Authorize, it's a powerful tool, can help you gain a better understanding of your traffic in your Kubernetes cluster without requiring you to make any significant changes to your setup. And whether you're looking to troubleshoot network issues, optimize performance, or simply gain a better understanding of how your cluster is being used, Authorize is definitely worth checking out. So here on the screen, as you can see, this is basically an example of running the Authorize Network Mapper Visualize command on the Google Cloud microservices demo. So I'll be showing you some demos as well. We'll be using Civo. So yeah, let's learn more about that. Before we get started, I also want to share a little bit more about how it works. So the network mapper tool that we have for Authorize, as you mentioned, it helps you to create a map of in-cluster traffic with your Kubernetes cluster. And it accomplishes this by capturing the DNS traffic and inspecting active connections, then resolving the IP addresses participating in the connections to the corresponding pods, right? So that's basically how it works. And the mapper then crawls up to the ownership hierarchy of the pod until it reaches the root object and building the network mapper as it goes. And this process is ongoing as long as the mapper is deployed in the cluster, which we'll be doing in this demo. You can use Helm and you can deploy that in your cluster. And when we talk about the authorized network mapper in itself, it is composed of several components. So the components, have their own specific roles. The first one being the mapper, which is a single deployment that resolves service names using the Kubernetes API with traffic information reported by the sniffers. The component number 2 is the sniffer, which is it is basically deployed on every node in the cluster, and it is responsible for capturing node local DNS traffic and inspecting open connections, right? And the third one, which is an experimental one, so Kafka watcher. This component is deployed once to your cluster and is responsible for capturing Kafka server logs and reporting them through the network map, right? And lastly, there's the service name resolution, which is also a critical component of the authorized network mapper project. And service names are resolved in one of the two ways. If an authorized service name label is present, that name is used. If not, a recursive lookup is performed for the Kubernetes resource owner for a pod until the root is reached. An example for this, if I want to explain that, what can be a good example? So let's say you have a deployment named client, which then creates and owns a replica set. Okay, now that, let's say, then creates and owns a pod, and then the service name of that pod is client, which is same as the name of the deployment. And the goal of this approach is to generate a mapping that speaks in the same language that devs team use, making it easier to understand and act on the insights provided by the network mapper. We'll be seeing a demo of this as well, but regarding how it works, if you want to sum up, the authorized network mapper, it's a powerful tool that helps to provide insights into the traffic patterns within a Kubernetes cluster. By leveraging DNS traffic and active connections, the mapper is able to provide detailed information about how different components within the clusters are interacting with each other. With its ability to resolve service names and provide a mapping that speaks the same language as the dev teams, the authorized network mapper is a valuable addition to any Kubernetes deployment. Now, the part you have been waiting for the most, demo time. So let's get started with the demo. Let me just let me run that. So we'll start with the basics and we'll start with the installation and we'll see everything in action. By the way, if you want to get started, all the links are in the description as well. All right, so I have my cluster here and make sure you have a Kubernetes cluster. Let's just look at the good old docs. So make sure you have a Kubernetes cluster. We have that, and without authorized cloud, we just need to use CLI. So let's say we copy paste, good, Helm repo update, good, and then I'm going to install authorize and create namespace as well. Not an issue. Here we go. So now it's installing authorize onto my Kubernetes cluster. I have a 2-node cluster running, so you can have as much as you want, but it's basically about that. So that's going to install. And here we can see, we talked about the components, right? So here you can see that this chart is a bundle of the authorized intents operator, the credentials operator, network mapper, Inspire. So it has a bunch of things. We'll do a different video on the instance operator later on. And Initial deployment can take a few minutes, and you can add some flags or whatever. And yeah, pretty cool stuff. So we can then check if that's deployed, but now we can check whether the pods are running or not, right? So yeah, container creating, it's taking some time. Okay, so we're gonna try, and you're gonna have all the stuff running. Cool. And also one more quick thing, make sure you install Calico, because by default your cluster may not support network policy enforcement, and Calico helps solve this issue. So you can check out the command for that here. Just kubectl apply and then the link for Calico. All right, you can check everything is running, everything looks good, and it says that you also need to install the authorized CLI, which makes sense because you need to interact with the network mapper. I am on Apple Silicon, so or I can just use Brew. It's all right. I'm gonna install. So that's done. And now what we're going to do is we're going to deploy a demo to simulate the traffic so that we can see it in action and see how it works. So we can add some services in traffic to the cluster and see how the network mapper is going to build the map. So it's going to deploy the simple example of client 1, client 2, and the server communicating over HTTP. No worries about that. And if you want to check out the code, the YAML file that is available over here, you can see one service, a deployment, and another deployment, and a namespace. So copy this, and that's looking good. And it's going to create all of these Kubernetes objects for us. There we go. And it's going to take some time. Say you can check out the pods, right? So you can see these three things are here: the server, client, and client 2 communicating over HTTPS. Okay, now the important part. So now we can learn about mapping the cluster, and this is exactly what happened. And as you can see, what I was shared in the when I was speaking about how it works. So the network mapper now starts to sniff traffic and build an in-memory network map as soon as it's installed. So as long as you have the mapper running, it's gonna do all these things that we just mentioned. And the CLI allows us to interact with the network mapper, and we can get the snapshots and all these other things. So we can get it in the form of images, a list, or export as JSON or intents. All right, so now that we have it installed, we can go to authorize. You can see here you have a bunch of options. So let's say we want to get the mappers. So I can say authorize network mapper, and you can get it in a bunch of ways. So let's say you want to get an image. So I can say visualize, and now you're going to give the namespace. So our application namespace was authorize tutorial mapper, right? And now the output of the file you want to have. So authorize tutorial, let's say map.png. Okay, so if I run this command, it's going to say exported graph as PNG format to path the file name. Okay, and here you can see my picture is generated. So now as you can see in a file format, you're able to see how these objects and services and everything are mapped to each other. So those are really simple examples, but I can check I have Argo running as well. So what I can do is, let me check for Argo. So if I go and say argo.png, let's say you create argo.png for the Argo namespace, Argo CD namespace, Argo CD. So let me just see how Argo CD is here. That's how it's mapped. How cool is that? You're able to see, like for all your namespaces and services, how they're mapped to each other. That's the whole point. That's what we're doing here. Okay, you can see for Kubescape as well. Let's just do one last. Kubescape. All right. Here you go for Kubescape. The scheduler, the operator, the gateway. Yes, it's going. The mapper, the thing that we talked about. It's going up and up and up and up, and as it's going, it's building this whole idea, whole map over here. As you can see. All right, amazing. That's not it. If we check out the documentation, you can see that you can also export it as a list. So here you go, exporting it as a list, and the simple example you're giving like this. And if I just go, let's say we do it for Argo CD again. There you go. Application controller in namespace Argo calls Argo. So this thing in the namespace Argo CD calls these, and this calls this, and this calls Redis. This in the name of Argo CD calls Redis as well. So if we talk about repo server Redis, so repo server to CD server Redis. So the same thing you're getting in visualization, you're also getting in the image. In the visualization, you're getting in the list as well. Exported as intents. This we'll talk more about later in the separate video, right? So you can use it as intents as well, which we'll talk more about. Intent-based access control, a newly coined term, and I've done a podcast on that as well. So if you want to check that out, you can check out the links in the description below. You can export it as JSON so that you can share it with people, or you can use it in other projects or other applications as well. So you can export it as JSON and save it as JSON. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of customization available. We'll talk more about authorized cloud later on in a separate video. But that's pretty much about it. It's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so in summary, the authorized network mapper provides valuable insights into pod-to-pod communication in your Kubernetes cluster, and its ability to export the network map as client intent files allows you to, for easy configuration of network policies or Kafka client access with Kafka ACLs and MTS, and those advanced things around like intents and stuff. We'll be doing another video on that because that's another different open source project. Lastly, let's do one more example, and let's say if we delete the previous one, so you can delete this one, no worries, right? And what we can do is we can do a little bit of a bigger example. So this has like a demo of services. It's like an e-commerce website that you can use. Okay, so just gonna do that when my resources are being deleted. Okay, create the namespace. That looks good. I'm just gonna deploy my application here. It's gonna install a bunch of so you can see config map service and all sorts of things, deployment. So it's installing a bunch of things. So it's gonna give us a little bit of a nice e-commerce platform, right, that you can use. And you can browse the demo as well if you want. But let me just see if the services are container being created. It's going to take a few minutes. Then we're going to have a nice little shopping cart that we can work on. And you can see that it has so many objects. So our map would look a little bit more complex and, well, not complex, but like with a little bit more of like bubbles and stuff to really understand the power of the tool, right? When you have so many services running. Okay, and once you have that, you can run the network mapper visualizer. And here you can see ecom.png. So our e-commerce website looks something like this, right? You have the load generator connecting with front end, currency service, and you have the second link over here, the card service, Redis card, right? So it's building that as it goes. And similarly, you can, do it in the form of a list as well, right? Here we go. So front end in namespace authorize ecom demo calls this service in namespace, so on and so forth. So basically getting all the information around the the calls and the networking part and the all sorts of things. So it's pretty cool stuff. All right, so now that we have laid the foundation, in the next videos I'll talk about the automation of creation of network policies. I'll talk about the cloud offerings. But as a next step for you, you can get involved in the open source community. And let me just share with you how you can win some exciting swag. So we're doing a giveaway. We give away some swag. And often people ask me like, how do we get involved in open source projects and communities? So let me just share with you how you can basically, whatever you've learned in this video, how you can apply that somewhere and how it can be an active part of the authorized community. All right, so how to win swag? You can start this GitHub repository for intents operator, for which we'll do the video later on. You can start this repository of network mapper as well, which we already discussed, and you can share it on socials, that what you learned. And one of the great ways to do that is, let's say, Twitter threads or you can also take part in the We Make Devs blogging challenges. So we have some themes. Currently, we're giving away some nice Kubernetes books. So these are very expensive books, and we're giving away some nice books like networking in Kubernetes and observability, security, so on and so forth. So you can check that out, and you can take part in the cloud track, and you can write a blog around whatever you learned in this video, right? And how to take part and everything is listed on the website. And by the way, this website is also in the description below. And lastly, if you want to get involved in this open source community, you can go to authorize.com. You can join the Slack channel, and you can just get involved in the open source community. If you have any questions, you face any issues while using it or whatever, or you have any feedback, you can share it on the Slack channel. They're very friendly folks. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing your blog posts and Twitter threads, and really excited to see what you all learned from this video. Any questions you have, leave those in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe, because we'll be talking about policies and the cloud offerings and all these other things in the next videos. So I'm really excited for it. And KubeCon is coming up, so I'll definitely see you there, and we'll do some nice collabs over there as well. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.